I'm going to start by introducing our panel. We have Christine Martin Anderson, who is the COO, that's the Chief Operating Officer of Booz Allen. We have Governor Kevin Stitt of the state of Oklahoma, and Gary Tan, who is the President and CEO of Y Combinator. I am Megan McArdle. I write columns about government and other things for the Washington Post. And I'd just like to remind you that you can submit questions through the app. And if you submit them, and they're good, I will ask them of our panel, so please do that. So I'm just gonna start by remembering a famous Reagan quote that the scariest words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." And yet, when I look back, trust in government back then was pretty high compared to now. It's been a pretty steady decline. From 1972, 75% of the population expressed a great deal of confidence in the government, a great deal of trust in the government. And that's now around 40%. So the first thing I just want to ask is about this feeling that government has broken. And I want each of you to give government a letter grade from A to F. How well is American government working today? And you can interpret that question broadly with your local government, your state, the federal government, or all three levels. But I'm going to ask you to start.
Okay. Well, first I'll say I'm an optimist and probably close enough to it to see the good things that happen as well as the complaints. So I'm going to give it a C. Obviously, there are things that we can do better, but there are also really amazing things that our country does every day, and I think we have to give the government some credit for that.
Governor?
Well, the state of Oklahoma, I would give us like a A-, something like that. Federal government, to me, is an F. And the reason I say that is, states have a balanced budget. We have to operate within our means, right? So we have constitutionally, we're gonna spend what our revenue is, right? Every year we have this Board of Equalization meeting and talks about our revenue. Not so much in the federal side. And I just think we're facing an impending disaster on the national debt side. I really do. Republicans, Democrats alike, it's like we get elected and the expense side is just growing astronomically. We're $2 trillion over our revenue right now. We have a $36 trillion debt. And it's not like your mortgage payment where your principal and interest. I talk about this to Oklahomans, and it's interest only. It means we're never paying off that $36 trillion. And it gets worse, it's $2 trillion. But it's fixable. Like if we went back to the expenses, this just blows me away. Just go back to 2019, and if we had the same expenses in 2019, we have a balanced budget. And Ronald Reagan in 1982 started talking about a need for a balanced budget amendment. And every address after that, he talked about the need and begged Congress we had to put a check on the spending. And states now are the only hope. Oklahoma's got a trigger law. 29 other states have a trigger law. If we get to 34, we can force the federal government to have a balanced budget amendment. And I think ultimately we have to spend. Congress has a tough job. All these different needs across the federal government. But you have to have a limit, and it's got to be what our revenue is. And I just think that is the reason I would give them such a poor grade, because there is no check. There's all these do-gooders and all these people coming in. Let's spend money on this or this program or this program. And there's just no limit right now, and it's very, very scary for our future.
Mr. Tan, how would you grade government?
Well, I'm a private citizen. I run an incubator called Y Combinator in San Francisco, California. Thanks for welcoming a San Francisco Democrat to a wonderful crowd today. San Francisco is a very important town, and it is a town. It's not bigger than Columbus, Ohio, but it has an annual city budget of $14 billion. And when it comes to state capacity, I'd be worried that we're actually farming out massive amounts of the things that really need to be done by the state to nonprofits that frankly have scandal after scandal in San Francisco. And this really hurts because at Y Combinator, we get more than 70,000 applications a year. We interview about several thousand of them. We fund about 700 of them. About 5 to 10% of those end up becoming worth $1 billion or more. About 20% of all the startups in the United States that make it a $5 billion valuation, 20% of them come through our program. So we are actually brain draining the world. About 30% of our companies Their founders, they're one or two people, leaving a job or dropping out of school, and they're moving and starting companies from Europe, from all around the world. They're starting American companies that, 5 to 10% of the time, they end up creating thousands of jobs. So startups that you've heard of, DoorDash, Coinbase, Airbnb. Earlier, Patrick Collison of Stripe was here. All of them started just one or two people. Patrick himself is an immigrant from Ireland. And so, what's really important to me is we're bringing people to San Francisco, and yet I would give San Francisco, up until maybe this year, probably an F-. I mean, this is a city that has truly not served its people. My Asian American elders in our community were stabbed and beaten in the streets, and there was no justice for them. Our students, San Francisco, of all places in the world, like who here took algebra in school in 7th and 8th grade? San Francisco is the city that banned algebra from being taught to children in public middle schools. And I am the outcome of a public school education in the San Francisco Bay Area. If you take away algebra, my whole story is, cannot happen. I could not have gone to Stanford. Could not have studied engineering. I couldn't have started a company. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today. And so for me, the Bay Area is what unlocked prosperity. It allowed me to participate in starting a company, creating jobs. And now today, we hope to help the next generation of founders to do that. And so what I really want and what I'm hopeful for is San Francisco can actually be a model for change, not just in the Bay Area or California, but maybe across the country, in that I would give the prior administration an F-. But what's happening now with Mayor Daniel Lurie and with the new renewed Board of Supervisors is that we are actually making common sense choices that are actually serving the people now. We have a new district attorney. We recalled the last one, and the new one is actually prosecuting. We have a new board of supervisors that is supporting public safety. We have a new school board that was briefly in the news today because they almost adopted, what was it called, grading for equity, which would make a D, 60% was a D, they would change that to 20%, a passing grade. A 20% would be a passing grade, and an A would be 80%. And luckily we turned it around because we're paying attention now. So
I think this brings
He
up...
sounds like a Republican now.
Yeah, are you sure you're a Democrat? You're sounding more Reagan-like with every passing moment.
Well, in 10 years, San Francisco Democrat will mean something different.
So, I think this brings up a bunch of really important points that I want to pick up on. And the first is this sense that, our state and local governments can be the laboratories of democracy, as we keep saying, and they produce some of our best outcomes. If you look at what Texas has done with renewable energy, for example, right? It turns out that this fairly conservative state has been on the forefront. On the other hand, they're also the places that go the most wrong. And so it seems like there is a tension, there's a tension certainly in Washington when I talk to people about policy, between the people who want to push things up to the federal government because they see so much dysfunction at the state level, especially I think in California, if I'm honest. And then the people who want to push it down because you can be nimbler, right? San Francisco was doing really badly, but it has turned a whole lot faster than the federal government tends to. And so I'd like to talk, and I'd specifically like to ask you, because you do so much of this, is there a trade-off between the state, the federal government's capacity is larger, but its inertia is also larger, as with any large object?
Yeah, I think every administration, every group that's in power wants to do a little bit of both, right? For the things that they think are most important, if you're in the federal government, you're in general going to try to get as many states and or localities to do that thing your way, right? And then for those things that you think are really broken and that you don't think the federal government should do, you're going to try to, push it out and say, oh, the states should have the choice. And this back and forth happens every administration. But I think the real critical issue is whether or not the fundamentals get solved. And so biggest state expense is healthcare, right? the argument over how much matching there should be in Medicaid or how many different matching formulas there should be, last I counted, I think there's 7 for different services for what the matching formulas are. That's the wrong, and how much coverage you'll give and how many uninsured there are. It's exactly the wrong conversation. Because most everyone in a bipartisan way, if they had a choice and there was infinite money, would say coverage should be for everybody. What we're not solving at any level, state, local, federal, commercial, is the exploding cost of healthcare. And it's that formula of how much it costs per person times how many people you cover that equal the budget problem. And so from my point of view, pushing it up or down, that to me is the less important conversation. The more important conversation is what are the incentives to fix the problem? And whether it's education and whether or not we're happy with K through 12 education or higher ed lately is in the news a lot, or public safety, the core issue needs to get addressed, and that's why those issues keep getting kicked around. And I think we need more innovation and we need more tech to really address the root issues.
Does dividing the responsibility in the way that we so often do with so many programs, right? Medicaid is administered by the states, it's funded by the federal government, mostly, but then sometimes more depending on who the person is and all of this. Does that prevent us from solving the problems because we get mired in those disputes?
It's the way the republic is defined, right? So there's only a few things that the federal government's supposed to do, and then the rest is supposed to be done closest to the people where you can vote with your feet. That division between federal government, state, local does create inefficiencies, but it is sort of a trade-off with those freedoms and allowing people to have different experiences that fit their local, preferences. So I think it does create inefficiencies, especially in the Medicaid program. I said there's 7 different matching programs, et cetera. But all of this is about trying to incent certain services getting covered, et cetera, and the federal government using the power of the purse to try to incent the state to do something they want them to do by saying, I'll pay for it, right? I personally don't think that that's the right answer because it's just shifting who's fiscally responsible. The right answer is to create the incentives to have the states fix it. And so I do think it creates inefficiency if you try to use just money, and in politics you can trade policies and money for votes. It doesn't get at the underlying issues. So that's the incentives we need.
Yeah, Governor, I'd like to ask you about that complexity and the burden of adding federal money. So in the supreme irony of my life as a libertarian columnist, my father was a lobbyist. And he lobbied for the local infrastructure. Yes, every time I would write something mean about lobbyists, I would get a humorous note that said, you do know what paid for college, right? But he, as lobbyists go, he was the most forgivable kind. He represented the people who built sort of roads and bridges and things that I think even most libertarians think, yeah, the government's probably not going to crowdsource the George Washington Bridge. But he would say that adding federal money to one of their projects would add 5 years and would increase the cost by 50%. And I think that that's the experience of a lot of governors, also local mayors and so forth. I mean, is that the experience, and how does that?
I think so. I'll give you a quick example. I think people enjoy hearing this. Permitting reform is on everybody's mind, right? Republican governors, Democrat governors, we all want to talk about permitting reform, whether you think wind energy is the answer or gas pipelines. We need quicker projects to be built. It takes U.S. like 8 years longer than it does the other developed countries. So one of our Oklahoma is like the pipeline capital of the world. We've got major companies that are located there. So Williams is a major pipeline company. So they had Constitution Pipeline. And their CEO, Alan Armstrong from Tulsa, Oklahoma, he was giving a speech and letting people know the need for permitting reform. And it cost them twice as much to permit a project and go through the legal battle as it does to actually build the project, the pipeline. And that's just, when people hear that, you're like, well, why can't we fix this? That's part of broken government, right? Everybody agrees that's ridiculous. And then why does it belong in the states, your question, versus the federal? Obviously, federalism, and the states created the federal government. And when you have these pendulum swings from the Trump administration, the Biden administration, back to the Trump administration, and businesses need certainty. And Obama kills the Keystone Pipeline, and then Trump resurrects it, and then Biden kills it again, and then finally the businesses are going, we're done, right? And just on the Keystone Pipeline, Constitution up through New York. New York blocked that, and some of my Democratic governor friends from the Northeast, they asked me, why do you have such cheaper electricity in Oklahoma than we have up here? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you really asking that question? You need gas. And so, but then you have states weaponizing what's called the 401 rule inside the EPA that gives states discretion, right? But the problem is they weaponize it, and they never give an answer to a business. That's a problem. We have to fix these kind of things because, people in Connecticut, they just want to drive their kids to school and piano practice, and they want a good, they've got to heat their homes and their businesses. Why do we think a reliable, affordable grid is somehow partisan, right? And so I think those are conversations that, smart people like you have got to put pressure on your representatives to say, hey, we want to bring common sense back to America, and we can win. We can continue to beat the competition. We can build projects faster. Guys like this, the innovation in America, American dream is alive and well. We just need to get out of our own way and allow these projects to happen.
So let me ask, do we think about federalism wrong? Right, I mean, we tend to think of we layer it, right? The federal government is seen as having often more state capacity, which I think is true certainly in the case of things. During the pandemic, we can argue about what the CDC actually did, but no, states were not going to individually duplicate that level of the number of people studying infectious disease and so forth. That would be redundant, and the government has scale, federal government has scale and should use its scale. For things like citing, pipelines and electricity, it has become a real problem that you can get all of these functional states to lay it, but if there's one state where they're letting the community come in and delay it for 30 years with a lawsuit, that kills the pipeline, that kills the electricity grid. So should we, instead of trying to layer things where the federal government wants something done and then it sort of says, okay, well, I'm going to give you some money, but then you have to do exactly what I want with it, we think about what are the things that the federal government has to do, because these are genuinely national scale projects, and what are the things the states could do? So I could make an argument for federalizing Medicaid entirely. I don't know if you would like that or not like it, but I could make an argument for just saying, look, have the federal government pay for it, have them administer it. That is something that could be done in the way that Medicare already is done. But then education, does the federal government need to be involved really at all? Other than maybe redistributing some funds to the poorest schools from richer areas. Should we be rethinking, Governor, how we do this to make it more about dividing responsibilities between the places? And I also would ask both you and Gary to come in on which areas should local governments be handling and the states mostly be staying out of?
I mean, great conversation to have. On education, you mentioned that. Anybody in here graduate high school before 1978? A few people? How is that possible? Are you kidding me? Did you know the Federal Department of Education wasn't created until 1978? Jimmy Carter signed that into law. You can't possibly. Do you think your education was any worse than it is today? And so I think it's funny for us to think about that, but if Trump gets rid of the Federal Department of Education, it's the states that hire the teachers and build the schools and educate the kids, and we've been doing it. And so what exactly does the federal government do? And then you talk about Medicaid. It's the states that have the hospitals, the doctors that set the programs up. We know who the aged, blind, disabled, the pregnant women, the children, the people that we put on these programs. And if we had more flexibility without all the strings attached, we can do it better. So I set up DOGE Oklahoma to help with the federal DOGE to say, hey, about 40% of the state revenue, whether it's in California or Oklahoma, comes from the federal government. So how do we work with our federal partners to say, hey, if we need to cut and we need to have more of a balanced budget, then if you give us more flexibility on things like education or things like Medicaid, then here's how we would do it in Oklahoma, and we could return $2 billion. That's what we think we can do with more flexibility on our spending. And then if you extrapolate that over all 50 states, there's $1 trillion worth of savings. So the states are the ones that created the federal government, not the other way around. The states used to get together with other states, and how does free trade work? How does it work? How does our pipelines work between each other? And why is the federal government involved in every single thing of our lives? And I think that's a conversation that the pendulum is swinging a little bit, and people are on both sides of the aisle are having these conversations, and we can have a healthy debate. What should the federal government do? You talked about CDC and some of those things that, of course, we need the federal government to handle. But that's always, what actually do we want them to handle? There's never a shortage of good ideas.
So, Gary, I actually want to bring you in and ask, a mystery to me about San Francisco is you have all of these incredibly productive people. They all know how to build stuff and make it work. And then they elect one of the least effective governments in the United States. And so I actually first want to ask you why that happens. But second of all, one of the solutions that I have seen a lot of people propose is that they want to push stuff up to the state and take it out of the hands of the dysfunctional city council. And it really says a lot that when you are trying to push things up to the California state government in order to make them work better. What do you think about that? Is that are you better off letting the state of California force San Francisco to build housing? Or are you better off keeping that local control and using the incredible supply of hardworking and gifted people you have to reform the government you have at the local level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, to answer your first question, how did it get so bad? I would argue that locally, we allowed national sort of culture war issues to become so prevalent and so top of mind that it overshadowed any of the kitchen table things we cared about, like actually having rent that isn't $5,000 or $10,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. I mean, that's
crazy.
The basic things that we need for our community, we did not get. And so I guess there are a bunch of different weird examples here. For instance, our law enforcement and criminal justice system became so broken that multi-time violent offenders had to be kept in check by the federal government, by DOJ and FBI. The local authorities were so unable to have any state capacity to keep people safe that it was the feds that actually came in there during the worst times in sort of the during COVID and the time before that, to come in and say, actually, this person, the local government is not stepping in, the Superior Court has let them out too many times, we're going to bring them up on federal charges. So, in that sense, I'm very thankful for a federal government that can do this. Another interesting example I would say is, there was a bill that almost killed AI in California called SB 1047, which was onerous, premature, and today I think we all have been talking a lot about AI as something that is incredibly important for America to remain at the forefront of. But if this were passed, this would have actually created a lot of regulation around who could actually run these models, who could train these models, and they'd actually be very onerous for my startups, for little tech. And so, we're really glad that there's actually, things in the current bill, I believe, in front of Congress to sort of say, hey, for the next 5 or 10 years, let's cool it with the state regulation of AI, because this is something that has national significance for us, and similar to pipelines or natural resources or even housing, these are things that the state or federal government should really care about. And then I would say, the story of San Francisco, I hope, with the new mayor, with the new board of supervisors, is that if business people pay attention and are not afraid to speak out, that's really, I got involved in local politics only in 2021, really, during COVID. And in that time, we recalled a DA, we took over the Board of Supervisors. Most importantly, we actually took over the local SF Democratic Central Committee. And so now we have moderate policies that are actually going to fix the city. And my hope is, San Francisco is the city that gave us large language models and self-driving cars, and Kamala and Gavin Newsom. So the next generation of SF politics, what we hope is to actually bring kitchen table actual things we care about: housing, safe streets, and actually schools that work, public schools that actually work. And if at the local level we can win, well, then I hope that San Francisco Democrats can go to state and remake the Democratic Party from there.
A concept I learned from Y Combinator is default alive versus default dead. And normally, and the idea is, if you're a company, if you just kind of keep going as you are going, are you alive in 24 months or are you dead in 24 months? And I think a big problem with government in general, right, is that it's default alive. And usually that's supposed to be a good thing, but the government doesn't think of itself as able to die. And so it doesn't act with the urgency of, in some sense, our cities right now are kind of inching on to default dead in a lot of ways. Certainly my own city of Washington, D.C. is, but it's acting like it's default alive. It's not, it's very hard to get that change. But that has been the grim portion of the program. And now I actually want to go to how could we use technology to fix some of these problems? Because I know that is something that everyone here thinks a lot about. So what are ways that we can use to reduce the complexity, make things better, enable government to have higher state capacity, save money, lower taxes, less spending, all of the good things that we want. And I'm going to start with you because you do so much of this.
Well, and I think we've talked in different points today at different panels about the Baumol cost disease, right? This idea that costs go up. You raised it even in our prep, right? Costs go up even when productivity doesn't go up. And this is core in a lot of the issues that states have to handle, which are health and human services issues, whether it's and education, right? And AI gives such promise for that. I mean, I think that the productivity gains that we can get in highly cognitive functions are really important. And so I do believe that we need to help states, anyone who has the capacity to help states. I mean, when I say we, I mean, startups, private companies, the federal government that creates an environment for it, to really allow them to get the efficiency gains that we have not seen. And that will help us drive down the costs in some areas, because what we really should be focused on is growth. And when you have too much of the intellectual capacity and the financial capacity tied up in areas where we're not getting the outcomes that we want, right? And we're not getting the productivity gains that we need, then I think that's where AI gives us a lot of promise. And I think we should be doing that every which way we can. I think also what we've learned of what's possible in terms of data sharing and really being able to bring large amounts of data together and start to really understand and solve problems, whether that's reducing disease and giving people greater health, or whether it's really trying to get to an education system that serves the local communities. And I do believe that most should be local and state. I mean, the federal government only has 3 responsibilities in the Constitution. They can print currency, they're supposed to do national defense and interstate commerce. And I think it's interstate commerce where a lot of this other stuff seeps in. So trying to get it right at the source, to me, right at the source is where the residents live.
So let me ask about the talent problem for that. And I know that you exist to solve that talent problem for a lot of governments. But the IT capacity, as we've seen, especially at the state level with, the famous example is the pandemic unemployment benefits, where we had to give everyone huge checks because we literally could not reprogram the unemployment systems in any reasonable amount of time to just slightly increase the benefits, right? Those things, the federal government's capacity is weak compared to the private sector. I think it's fair to say they have a lot of, the process is weak, right? It's not the people necessarily, it's just that the way that they do procurement, the way they write RFPs, the way they take 20 years to go through all of the channels. The states have an even bigger problem, which is that they're simply smaller, which means that they have less that not every state, but a lot of states have less in-house expertise, and then local government has that problem even more. So how do we do a digital transformation when most of America's tech talent is attracted to our incredibly vibrant, awesome private sector, where states have ring-fenced themselves with a lot of procurement rules and so forth that make it hard to do transformational change at the speed at which transformational change is happening?
Well, I've been impressed with what you've been doing in your state around really focusing on growth and trying to unlock capacity in manufacturing and other places. I mean, the talent exists. It's not, you can't think of talent just as who works for what government, right? I mean, they have to harness the private sector, and that includes, tech in many, many areas. And that problem is imminently solvable. I think even look today, right? Look at the wave of tech and Silicon Valley that's really interested in making an efficient government. I mean, that's something to be harnessed. That can be done at the state level, at the local level. I think we can't assume that we're going to somehow have all of the talent that has chosen a life of service just inside of government. And we are seeing, whether it's new grads going into government or whatever, the tech ability of every generation is higher, right? We just need to tap it, right?
So let me ask that question in a different, less negative sounding way. How do we unleash that potential? How do we, what positive steps do we need to take right now to unleash the potential of the people who are there and of the technologies that are available and becoming available? Oh, okay.
Very anxious
I have
people down
two
here.
crazy things that are going on right now that maybe you haven't heard about yet. First is one of our best founders from the YC community, Joe Gebbia, one of the co-founders of Airbnb, $100 billion company. He didn't have to do this. He's in the Doge team out of the Office of Personnel Management. And have you guys heard the story of the mine that has, basically all file cabinets? It is the team that takes care of all of the retirements for the entire US government. And on average, any given retirement would be about 90 pages of handwritten notes previously. So what they've done, literally in the last 100 days, is replaced it with a software system that takes the process to set up a retirement was 9 months, and dozens of people looking at just human beings, literally taking things from file cabinets and moving it. And they replaced it with an all-digital system that brought it from 9 months down to 30 days. And they're still chopping that down. And so all that took was, I visited them in DC. It looked like a startup. It was literally, it was Joe Gebbia and his best cracked engineers and designers in a room. And it was all whiteboards. It looked just like a scene out of South of Market in San Francisco. But they're doing it for the government. And so I think that that's an incredible model. Look out for Joe, he's incredible. And then the other thing that has classically been true, I love seeing the Palantir logo everywhere. So Palantir, I actually designed that logo. I was very early there, friends with Joe. We went to college together. And one of the things that made Palantir truly great was that they recognize this thing. So there's very few, there may be 100,000 truly great software engineers in the entire world. And most of them would not be able to, they wouldn't want to go work on a government project in the past. And the wild thing now, there's this thing with large language models called vibe coding. So literally using OpenAI and Anthropic and new startups like Cursor or Windsurf, you can actually sit down and one person who would normally do the work of one software engineer could easily do the work of 10 or 100. And they can do that. They can, there are startups in our YC batch that now 95% of their code is written by AI. They supply just the 5% that is the special sauce that they learned from their customers or the things that they need. And so that's actually really good news. Literally, the rocks can talk, they can reason, they can think, now they can write code.
Governor, what are your thoughts on
what I would add is, your question was, how do we, use innovation, AI to make government more efficient, right? And so until you incentivize government to be more efficient, there's zero incentive. Remember, there's an unlimited budget. They can spend whatever they want. So, you saw
the bond market might have something to say about that eventually.
Perfect example. So how big should state government be? I focus on Oklahoma, and a state. 4.1 million people. We're the 28th largest state population-wise. Oklahoma City, by the way, is the 20th largest city now in the country. Go Thunder. Who's a Thunder fan in here? All right. But how big should state government be? I ask myself this a lot, right? And so I study all the other states. Perfect example. I think you'll like this example. So New York and Florida, those states are about the same population size. Florida is actually bigger now than New York, okay? But little over 20 million people. Florida's more populated. So how big should their budgets be? You would think they'd be about the same. New York's budget is $233 billion. Okay, is that a lot? I don't know. Let's compare it to a bigger state, Florida. Florida is $115 billion. All right, so the only difference, New York has a 10.9% income tax. Florida has a 0, and New York's in a death spiral. There's no way they can catch up. They cannot cut $100 billion out of their budget. Their only option is to keep increasing taxes. And so that's on a state level. So I truly believe you have to, government will never say, you've given us too much money. We as the people have to tell them what their limits are. And right now there's an open checkbook on the federal level. And if we don't address that, I think all these other things are awesome. But if we don't say, here's our limit, and there's a balanced budget amendment, there's some kind of check on the spending, it's difficult, because the way politics work is the money's always on the yes side. The way these people get reelected is by doing what the lobbyists, the special interests, all those folks want, and you just can't go against the leadership, and that's the problem.
As a proud daughter of New York State, I would agree with you that our government is highly dysfunctional. I'm now a Washingtonian, so I have chosen to leap from out of the frying pan and into the fire. But I would argue that the spending is a problem. But so, for example, when Oklahoma got its historic aluminum investment, congratulations, I was genuinely shocked. Because I think of that as something that happens if you were lucky enough to have access to cheap Canadian hydro or to live near Icelandic geothermal. And I was like, Oklahoma's electricity prices can't possibly be that low. And then I went and looked, and wow, your electricity prices are really low. And that is a huge problem for New York State. It's all of the little things. And I think we could, the finance industry throws off a lot of cash. And that allows you to tax at a higher level than if you are dealing with physical factories that have lower profit margins, that have workers who require more services in some ways. They need infrastructure, right? You don't need to build a port to Goldman Sachs. They can just, they can get themselves to the office in their black cars. But it's all of the little decisions that New York makes, and they never think about, is this making it harder for people to build business in my community? Is this? And so one question I would like to ask you is, why Oklahoma is relentlessly focused on those questions when other states aren't? Why do Texas and Florida think so hard about those questions, about like the nuts and bolts of keeping government small, when California and New York have everything big, a liberalism with? What is it the cultural difference in the voters? Is it that you need to work harder for it? You don't have Wall Street just sitting there, or Silicon Valley kind of minting money for you to spend on your constituents?
I mean,
although you have oil fields, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. But yeah, you mentioned we're getting the first, in 45 years, an aluminum smelter has not been built in the U.S., and we're getting that located in Oklahoma.
Sorry, I should have explained that more clearly. But.
And so we've been working on it for a couple of years. The UAE, it's Emirates Global Aluminum, and because of our reliable, affordable grid, they're coming. 40% of their expenses is electricity, and we did a little bit something innovative. We took our incentive package and we bought an annuity that would basically pay them over the next 15 years to even streamline their utility prices more. So I didn't give the company money. I actually took that money and gave it to, we bought an annuity that would subsidize their utility price to guarantee them this thing. So we just had to get creative. And then we have a port. Most people don't realize this. The most inland port goes all the way to Tulsa, so they can get their bauxite and some of the raw materials there. And so it was great. But we pay in Oklahoma a third for our electricity price of what you do, here in San Francisco. And it might be, utility prices may not matter for the Goldman Sachs and your folks, but they matter to the plumbers, and they matter to middle class, and they matter to Americans. And so that's where people are voting with their feet, and they're saying, hey, we just want to take our kids we want to raise our kids. We really all want the same thing as Americans. We want the best education for our kids. We want the best infrastructure, healthcare, and the best economy. And when we get away from that and we start letting special interests rule the day, and not that these things aren't important decisions, but we need to, as Americans, say, listen, let's get back to the basics. Let's get back to what we need to, continue to grow our economies. And I think that's limiting the size of government and not letting the do-gooders tell us everything that they should do with our tax dollars.
All right, I am going to, unfortunately, the tablet has logged me out. So I'm going to be taking questions from the audience but before I do that, I'm just going to ask one final question. You have the power, God has come down and given you the power to take away one rule from state, local, federal government, any rule you want, to change it, to alter it, to remake it in order to increase American state capacity, increase its innovative capacity in government. What is that rule and why? Lightning round.
I'm going to say it's a balanced budget amendment.
On my end, I hope for platform neutrality. AI is about to happen, and my nightmare is the sort of market power that big tech has. Who here uses Siri? I don't use. I have an iPhone. I don't use Siri because it's using 3-year-old technology, and you just bumped up against the reason why we need platform independence, platform neutrality. Everyone uses the internet. The internet created trillions of dollars of value for everyone. We need platform neutrality because we're going into this new phase where your AI agent is going to know everything about you. And if there's only one, well, there's only going to be one mega tech company. I don't want that. I want thousands. I want tens of thousands of tech companies that are all thriving all the way across the United States, just not just in San Francisco. And the way that happens is we actually have to have platforms the way we had net neutrality for the internet back in the 90s.
Just one?
Just one, sorry. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night, and while I think the audience is probably up for it, like some of them will have flights to catch eventually, so.
I'll have to go back to my passion, which is and has been healthcare. And I would say that I would allow, I only have to pick one. I think I'd start with definitely negotiating drug prices and we have got to get the healthcare costs down so that we can get people healthy again, so we can get our state budgets unlocked, so we can get our local budgets unlocked, so we can get our federal budgets unlocked, and so that we can do more for the people. So there's a lot in that list. There's a whole deregulation that has to happen, but I had to pick one.
They have a tablet with questions for me, sorry. All right, should we view state capacity as a form of national competitiveness? And if so, who in US government is actually responsible for making government work? Let's not always see the same hands.
But the question was, should we use state capacity?
Should we view state capacity as a form of national competitiveness? Should we think of this as, look,
I think so. Listen, the states compete. I have an international strategy. The reason we landed that EGA company from the UAE, Abu Dhabi, is because I've met with 80 different ambassadors. I've done trade missions to Asia. We've signed MOUs with the UK, with Canada. Congress is so dysfunctional that a lot of these countries are coming to states to do business, to talk to us.
Because you have the ability to actually make the deals and to execute on the infrastructure and so
That's right. That's right. We went to Select USA. Select USA is a Washington D.C. where all the companies from around the country will come in, or around the world will come in to Select USA, right? And then all the states will be there competing. It's kind of a trade show deal, and really they talk about permitting, power, okay, and people. Those are the three things. That's what they want to talk about. Can we get the permits done? Well, Oklahoma, I signed an executive order that tells all of my regulatory bodies, if you don't have the permit within 30 days, it's free, okay? And so that's what we love capital in Oklahoma. I come from the business world. I was never in politics until, if you ask my wife, I had a midlife crisis and decided to run for governor. But I just wanted to get involved, and I don't think government should have been, it's not an industry. Politics should not be an industry. Our founding fathers thought you should be a successful rancher or farmer or teacher or business person, and you go serve your state. It's called public service. And then you come back to the private sector and live under the same rules that we're there making. And we need more of that. And so I think that's why, of course, I love being able to compete against California. It's really easy because when you're out there, a lot of times the companies in Europe or Asia, they watch the Hollywood and all they know is New York or LA. And I'm like, guys, That is the worst place to set up a business, all right? That's the highest taxes, the highest permitting. You're going to have to hire a team of attorneys anytime you fire an employee. You got labor laws like crazy, lawsuits. You need to come. I just set up business courts. I had a great session this year. We cut taxes, and I set up business courts to compete against Delaware. So we want chancery courts. We want all Fortune 500 companies to be, we want you domiciled, and we want you using Oklahoma law. And so you're going to be protected in our state. And so I just think it's that simple. It's loving capital, loving business. Nothing happens until a business comes and they hire people, and businesses are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to, take care of their employees, their customers, the environment. And sure, that's part of the federalism, the laboratories of democracy. And so Oklahoma is different than Texas or Florida or New York or California or Kansas. And I think that's a good thing. We can see what's working in these different states.
Yeah, and you have to be growth focused. And there's no question that the right place to put the growth focus is at the governor, at the state level.
Any thoughts? Because I have a question that has your name written all over it.
Okay, please.
My company polls federal government staff, and we ask them about their use of AI. Half of them say they don't use it at all. Only 24% use it regularly. How do we incentivize a workforce rooted in this is how it's always been done to embrace innovation?
Yeah. Honestly, this isn't just a federal government issue. It's actually an issue in everyone's companies. We're actually finding this very interesting bifurcation where if you're running a 1,000-person company or 500-person company today, about most of them would probably have exactly that survey response. So in this case, the federal government is sort of mirroring private industry at this point. I think people are actually really underestimating to what degree how powerful this technology is, and it actually became extremely powerful only in the last 60 days, I would argue. If you had to take an IQ test with these things, you could average 130 IQ using the latest models using reasoning. So, and even in the last 60 days, Google released a model called 2.5 Pro that has a 2 million token context window. That means that it remembers 2 million words for any given request. And that wasn't true before. You were limited to 10,000 or 100,000. So, I think that actually it's a problem across all of society right now. Like the revolution is happening right now around AI, and everyone's acting like it didn't happen.
Well, let me ask a follow-up. This is also my experience. I'm now writing a lot of columns saying, guys, prepare for AI, and like get ready, use it now, master it. It is coming for your job. And I get two responses. One is like, I know, what do I do? And the other response is, nah, it hallucinates, right? And it's someone who like tried ChatGPT a year and a half ago, and they weren't impressed, and they aren't up to date on the latest models.
Yes.
But here's another thing, that as I have been writing these columns, I have started getting readers who write into me to say, I finally tried it. Oh my God, I saved like 4 hours writing a client letter, or I saved this amount of time. And the follow-up question I ask them is, what did you use the time for?
Yeah.
And I asked that to a lawyer recently, and he said, I take the fifth. And so here's an interesting thing, because I use the GPT every day. This is not true of all journalists. There is a real bifurcation even among us. I use it I tell it to, when I'm stuck and I can't get started writing a column, I'll be like, write a column on this. And I'll be like, no, that's terrible. And then I write it. And just that little thing, which is kind of dumb, is actually really used. I use it to give me feedback on my columns. I use it to do research. I use it to find people to talk to. I use it for all of these things. And I'm using this to do more work. But I don't think that's what most people are using it for. I think most people are using it to generate private leisure benefits, and that's why it's probably not showing up in the productivity statistics yet. So as we're rolling this out in government, how do we make it a productivity enhancing tool rather than a leisure enhancing tool for workers?
I mean, can you imagine how awesome it would be if the DMV used this stuff? Then maybe the service would actually be good. So, I mean, that's certainly the dream. I think the wildest thing to me around the backlash, we have a YouTube channel. We released one of the first videos about this vibe coding concept because we were spotting it in the bleeding edge of our founders. And I could not believe, we got thousands of hate comments about it from software engineers. And that was bewildering and very interesting to me because those are the people who are most likely to benefit from having it. So rather than have a rote job that kind of sucks, that you're not having an impact on society, you can actually, like those people who already know how to code, they're the people, they shouldn't worry about losing a job. They should think, actually, now I'm a 10x engineer and I can actually go and spread software absolutely everywhere. And if you're wondering, like, well, do people really need that? Going back to Apple, I mean, who here uses Calendar? That app is the worst. Think about Apple, with infinite resources, cannot hire enough really good software engineers to make Calendar a good app, an app that we all use. So, the answer to this is not, like, especially in coding, is that, is this stuff going to take away the coding jobs? No, it's going to multiply the amount of software in the world by 1,000x.
I think this is a really inspiring answer, but you guys all lead people. How do you translate that inspiration into employee behavior?
And I have to say that I think we are underselling the way AI is being adopted, right? So I don't think the Gen AI examples are really the ones that are the most impressive right now. I mean, just seeing how like we are and others are using AI in government. I mean, looking at AI in cyber and how we can learn from threats in real time with using AI and then really improve our cyber defenses. Using autonomous AI and looking at autonomous drones and drone swarms that are being used for AI. We're looking at, in our own work, some of the work that we do for the government, we're able to use agentic AI to really speed up processes and to get more done, right? To let the citizens get their benefits faster. We're using it internally. I mean, we get 5,000 resumes a night. Nobody was ever reading those. But now everyone can get screened against all of our open requisitions and we can match people to where they need to be. It is everywhere and super powerful, definitely productivity enhancing. And my 86-year-old father-in-law, my husband convinced him he's writing a book to use AI. It took forever to convince him, but he tried it once and he was hooked. So I think it's going really fast.
All right, I have the last question. Governor, I'm not bringing you in this because I think that you have something to say about the last question, which is the discussion about what should be done at various levels of government is interesting, but I'm curious what the panelists think should be delivered by the private sector. For example, there are competing narratives about private roads, private prisons, et cetera. What public-private partnerships carry the most promise? I think this one has you written all over it.
Well, it's not private prisons. So when I took office as a businessman, I came in and started looking at all the different stats, comparing us to states, and I realized we were last place in incarceration rates. Okay, we were 50th out of all 50 states. I'm like, well, that's weird. Either our people are worse than everybody else, or our policies are bad, right? And so we went about, and so criminal justice became kind of a passion of mine, reform, and so now we've moved 10 spots. We're 40th now. I've closed 4 prisons, and we just bought out, I think, the last private prison in our state because that was the worst outcomes. They're incentivized, obviously, rightfully so, but that's a function that I can't get my mind around how we should outsource that to a private for-profit entity. And so that's certainly not one. We're now number 2 in the country in lowest recidivism, which I'm really excited about. So our numbers should still keep getting improving. And then, so I mean, public-private partnerships. We've done a couple things like pay for success models. So some of our great philanthropic groups will come up with an idea and they'll say, "Hey, Governor, if this works, will you reimburse us?" Like, in other words, women that get out of incarceration, if we set up a program to help them get on their feet and retool them and educate and all this, will you reimburse us if it works? And I'm like, absolutely. So we've set up some of those programs as well. So I think that's a great opportunity for the nonprofit groups to come in and get more funding if they can prove a model works. So we've done a lot of that in Oklahoma as well.
You look like you have some thoughts.
No, I'm
Gary, I'm going to give you the last word then.
I guess final thought would be LLMs. I'm really excited about the chance for LLMs to be useful for people in government to actually spot waste, abuse, fraud. I mean, San Francisco, of all places, we're spotting all kinds of fraud in the nonprofits. And I mean, I think the super hopeful thing, I just saw Mayor Lurie in San Francisco just cut the nonprofit budget by about $190 million. And that's really hopeful to me. That means that state capacity can come back. You know, he has people from the private sector like Ned Segal, he was the CFO of Twitter. You know, to see business leaders actually go in, bring accountability to the government in a compassionate way, in a way that serves the people. That's really what we hope for San Francisco, and you know, it's happening in the middle of this age of intelligence, where you know, now they can get X-ray eyes into how every single dollar is being spent.
Just hope the fraudsters don't get access to AI. Well, thank you all. Can we have a hand for our amazing panel? And